So, good morning, 9 o'clock. Thank you for joining me on the tutorial on Eclipse 4 on JavaFX. My name is Tom Schindel. I'm CTO of Best Solution, which is a small company located in Western Austria, Tyrol. It's a 4-hour drive from here. I'm a Java champion. I'm an Eclipse committer. I was on the team who wrote the first prototype implementation for Eclipse 4, what got Eclipse 4 after a long time of development. And I'm the project lead of the FXClipse project. It's the worst name. When I created the project, I never thought that people will have that much trouble saying FXClipse. It's not EFXClipse, it's FX and Eclipse. So the worst name ever. But if you start with a name, it's hard to change the name after you introduce the project to many people, and now many people are familiar with this terminology. Okay, so next is the last slide for today, because we are software developers. We do software development. We write code, and my belief is that you learn the technology best if you code it, not if reading slides. We will together in the first hour work on JavaFX, learn about JavaFX, learn about fXML, learn how to write JavaFX applications, how to theme them with CSS. That's the first hour. After the first hour, we do a 5 to 10 minutes break. Then we go on using JavaFX and Eclipse 4 together to write applications. So I will introduce you to modern concepts of Eclipse 4, of stuff that FXClipse or E4 and JavaFX is putting on top of the Eclipse platform that you can apply. And in the third hour, there is a small, medium-sized project I added to your computer with the zip files. And we will try to apply the knowledge that we got in the first 2 hours to this bigger application. So it's just that we need to fill there some gaps. Okay, so has everybody installed Eclipse? Is Eclipse running? Is it up on each laptop, on each computer? Not yet. First things first, do you in the back see, is the font big enough? It's a really bad beamer, so larger than this I cannot make it. Okay, so for you who are running late, there is the USB stick, there is software in it. Even if you have downloaded, what you need is the root elements, the zip files in the root directory. You need them because they contain source code, MP2 repositories. So, first thing, you need to start Eclipse. I hope you are all familiar with Eclipse as an IDE, so that you worked with Eclipse, that you know how to code in Eclipse. That's a prerequisite for this tutorial. Who in here has already used JavaFX? Okay, half have used it. You played around, or you're really writing commercial applications? No, I played around with it. Okay, yeah. It's been a couple of years. Okay, so
do you have the source code on the internet?
No, there is USB sticks around, so if not all are yet.
So this is, I'm not really allowed to put in foreign USB sticks for security reasons.
That's bad. Yeah. So what can we do then? I have not pushed it upstream somewhere. So, well, the first 2 hours you can work with us because there is no source code that you need. All you need is an IDE. You need to have Eclipse installed.
Yes.
You have to have FXClipse installed.
Yes. From Marketplace.
From Marketplace, yeah. Then you have a little bit older version, but that's fine. So you should be able to follow the first 2 hours, and then you're probably in trouble, and you cannot follow without the additional software.
Okay.
Okay. Good. So unfortunately, Eclipse doesn't allow me to make this font bigger. It's a deliberate choice of the Eclipse IDE developers that you are not able to increase the font size. Only the font size of the editor can be increased.
You can zoom with.
I can zoom with my operating system. Anyways, I don't know why. For presentation, that's a bad thing in the end, right? So, anyways, the left-hand side is not that important. So if you have Eclipse installed and start Eclipse, the first thing that we do, we create a JavaFX project. A project where we can code JavaFX applications. So there is, if you have the FXClipse tooling installed, there should be in your project wizard, there should be an extra section talking about JavaFX. There you see you can create a JavaFX project, you can a JavaFX library project. You are able to create JavaFX and OSGI applications. For the beginning, all we need is a pure JavaFX project. So give it a name, sample project. I'm sorry, I cannot increase that font. And if you have multiple Java versions installed, please make sure that you use Java 8 on your system. So on the next page, that's the default Java wizard. On the last page of this wizard, currently we leave that way. So we're writing a JavaFX application using Java in future, or next steps or next lab. We're going to use fxml to implement UIs in JavaFX. So you can just finish this. And now you should have a JavaFX project. You should notice some special things. There is a special library container here saying JavaFX SDK. This is from the time when we had to support Java 7, and Java 7 or Java 6 didn't have JavaFX included in the GRE. It was an extra download, and what this guy adds is a special jar file. This jar file contains helper stuff that allows you to use a CSS editor who knows about all JavaFX properties that you can apply on JavaFX. So this is what this guy adds. Now, when we open the main class, the important thing, a JavaFX application has to subclass a base class named application. JavaFX application. Your main class has to subclass that. This base class has an abstract method named start, and you need to implement that. And naturally, because we are writing a Java application, we have to have a main method, and all the main method does, it calls the static method launch. There is some magic going in here that this guy knows is a static method, and he knows that he has to create an instance of main. So they are using reflection and the call stack to find out that they have to create an instance of that. I have no idea why they did it this way, but that's the way how you launch a JavaFX application. Your subclass application, implement the start method, and create a main in here. What you get from JavaFX, who in here knows about SWT? SWT? Standard widget toolkit, when you wrote Eclipse plugins, you're familiar with that. A stage isn't in SWT, it's a shell, or a window in the end. So stage is the term from JavaFX for a window. Then in JavaFX, unlike you use in SWT, you create always a composite, and on a composite you put a layout. So you have a composite with a grid layout, a row layout, all the layouts. In JavaFX it's different. You have layout containers. You have a border pane who has a top, a left, a right, a bottom, and a center area. You have a VBox where things are vertical stacked above each other. You have an H box, the same in the horizontal manner. You have a stack layout, a stack pane, you have a anchor pane. So there are multiple layout containers available in JavaFX. And if you want to write an application, most of the time I find myself using border pane, Hbox, Vbox. Those are the most important. So you create such a border pane instance. And then to show all the stuff in the UI, you take this node that you created here, put it on a scene, and then put the scene on the stage. So you create your JavaFX UI, you put it on a scene, give the scene default sizes, and put that scene on the stage, and the final task is to show the stage on screen. So when you run this application, it's quite boring, because this application opens a window. If I'm able to, I'm unable to run as Java application. This application does nothing more than opening an empty window in the end. But we just put a border pane there, nothing else. So the first thing that we put there, we have naturally in JavaFX, we have all controls available that you can imagine. For example, you have a button. Always take care when you do button, not AWT. The best thing is that you add a filter for AWT. Who in the world is using AWT today? So anyways, just choose the right button element. It's JavaFX control button. New button. Hello, Eclipse. Come. If you're coming from SWT, in SWT always pass the parent composite when you create an instance of a control. In JavaFX it's not that way. JavaFX works similar to Swing. You create your element and then you add it to the parent container at a later point in time. So we created here the button, and then we need to add the button to the parent, which is set center V. So you create an instance of UI elements and then put it on your parent container. And if you rerun the application, we have an application running and showing a button. So when I click the button, I want the system to run an action. So I want to print out something or download something from the internet. So how can we attach ourselves and listen to events that are happening on the button, like a mouse click, press of return, hovering, keyboard input? How can we do that in JavaFX? And it's quite simple in JavaFX. So all you do is b.set. There is a slot called bset on. Everything that starts with on, set on. These are all events that are triggered by the node you have in your JavaFX UI. So when we want to listen for the button click or the pressing of the space on the button to run an action, we need to attach an action listener, which is an event handler. So what you pass here, normally, because everything in JavaFX has been designed with Java 8 in mind, so all event handlers, all this stuff that you pass on is a SAM type, single abstract method type. This means you can always use a lambda expression or a method reference, because you only have to implement one method. This will be if you write it in Java 8. Is there a effector. There was some source. I don't know how we can convert that to inner class, but with inner class you have event handler, just to see it. So event handler. This would be the pre-Java 8 code. You have an anonymous inner class as an event handler, and you have just one method here. That's why you can use a lambda expression instead of that. I find myself almost never use lambda expressions. I almost always use a method reference pointing to a method in my class. A lambda expression normally should not be more than 2 lines of code. If you find yourself writing more than 2 lines of code in a lambda expression, think about moving it to a method or use a method reference instead of that. Don't write such big lambda expressions in your code. That is not what they are good for. And now we can have a sysr hello. So when you work with JavaFX, unlike Swing, SWT, Qt, is not a direct drawing UI toolkit. It's a scene graph based toolkit. So you have no paint listener you can install somewhere. This is not there. You create a scene graph and somebody is translating this scene graph in on Windows, it's using DirectX to create your UI. On Mac, it's using on Linux, it's using OpenGL to transform your scene graph in the UI that is represented on the screen. That has the advantage that we can make use of the GPU. For example, when we do effects like or something like that, all of this is a shader program running on top of our UI, creating a shadow background, for example. We don't have to paint that. It's a shader program running in the background in the end, or running in it as part of the translation process. So that's why you can write very fancy UIs with JavaFX without bothering the CPU too much, because a lot of stuff can happen on the GPU. So the nice thing when you do have a scene graph based system is you can easily apply transformations. All you do is to transform the coordinate system of a special area in your scene graph. We can try that out by just simply adding a scroll bar bar, and then we have root set right bar. Launch that, you see it's not yet correct. We need a scroll bar going from top to bottom. This means that the orientation is not correct. So we need to set the orientation bar, set orientation vertical. Then we get a scroll bar that's running from top to bottom. We will use the scroll bar, give it a bar set min is 1 and bar set maximum of 10. We will use this bar to scale our button. So when we drag the bar, we want to transform the button and scale it 10 times as big as it is by default. And this is done applying transformations. So a button has a set scale X, scale Y, and scale Z property. This transforms the default scale is 1. If we, for example, say a scale of 2.0, 2 by X, and a scale Y, 2, then the button is twice as big. Things you notice, the button is not blurring. There is no blur happening. We have a scene graph and we apply transformation. Let's think about it as a vector graphic in the end. So we are not blurring an image that we have on the GPU. We are blurring the source, and then they still have a button that is not blurred. So we are applying transformations here on the source. So when we want to scale the button, we need to get informed when bar set on what's the method? Drag, moved, rotate. Set on. I thought there's an on value change. Okay. No. Bar set.
Can we just use the value property?
Yeah, right. Yeah. I wanted to get away without the value property for a second to show you how cool it is when you don't use properties. So when the value is changing, you have a property, and that's important in JavaFX. All attributes of your node elements can be observed, and it's not the way you do it with Swing, with Java Beans. Every JavaFX element is a so-called property, and you can attach a change listener or invalidation listener on such a property and listen to changes to the value. So you have a property, value property, and here you have a change listener. A change listener gets the following information. It gets the value you observe, it gets the new value, and it gets the old value. And when the value is changing, we set scale X, new scale Y is new. We need to make here a double value out of that, because what you get in here when you hover here over the expression, you get something. The new and old value are question mark super number. That's why you cannot pass them directly there. So whenever the value is changing, we update our element. But there's a better way in JavaFX to do this stuff. If you have here, if everything is observable and everything is a property, then there is also a scale X property. And the cool thing about properties is you can bind them together. If you ever use the Eclipse data binding in your code, it's completely the same concept. So what we can do, instead of attaching ourselves as a listener, removing that code, all we need to do is call b scale x property bind to bar value property. And the scale, the same is for the y property. So instead of attaching listeners and updating stuff yourself, you can bind those two together. So this means whenever this value is changed, it synchronizes itself to the scale property. By default, the value here is null, so set value is 1. So, to remember, everything in JavaFX, every property of a node of your UI elements can be observed. Everything is expressed as a so-called property. There are Boolean properties, there are tuple properties, there are string properties, there are local date properties. Whatever you can have properties that can be observed and can be bound together to keep them in sync. So, for example, with the text here, if you add a text field to the top, so if you have a text field f new text field, and we put that on root set top is f, we can make the text property of the button to be bound to the text property of our text field. Which means that when I'm here and I type hello world, you see that the value here is synchronized with the value there. This is a very powerful thing in JavaFX, that you can observe all properties and bind them together. You can really create really nifty and cool UIs using this property binding system that is built into your UI toolkit. It's not on top of it. It's built into the toolkit. It's not like in SWT where you first need to add Eclipse data binding to observe properties of your SWT controls. It's built into the toolkit itself. So you can use that everywhere and it works everywhere the same. This is a really, really powerful concept. So we have now those static transformations. What we also can do, we can apply really animations on top of all this stuff. Animations, when you do animations, for example, rotating something, it's nothing more than a transformation on the coordinate system. So if you want to have something rotate, you just need to apply transformation that always shifts the angle that you use. So, for example, if you want to have our button rotating all the time, you need a transition, a rotate transition. New rotate transition. So you give it the time it takes to rotate. Let's do it in 3000 seconds. We apply it on our button. And we rotate set from 0, rotate to set to 360. I think it's degree. Let's just check the Java doc. It doesn't say whether it's degree or not, but I'm very certain it's degree. And rotate dot play. The result is now running once. If I want to run endlessly, I say rotate set auto reverse true, then it reverses itself, and rotate set cycle is a rotate transition indefinite. Reverse means it runs this way and then reverses itself and then starts from the beginning. So, you can even run animations in parallel. So, say we want to have a fade transition as well. Fade, new fade transition. It's a duration of 3000 millis, 3000. And on the button. Then, if we want to run them in parallel, we are not playing this one, but we create a parallel transition, new parallel transition, which gets our rotate and our fade. And p.play. But naturally we need to say for the fade set from value 1, fade set to value 0. And fade set auto true, and fade set cycle count, fade transition indefinite. This means those two are now running in parallel. So we are applying a rotation, and at the same time we are applying a fade transition, and you can stack them together as much as you want. So you might think, what the heck is that really needed? Do I really need a toolkit where I can rotate stuff like that? And yes, you need. For example, as an experiment some time ago, I set myself out and thought about, can I implement something similar to material design in JavaFX? And for example, if you look at, for example, this floating label in your Android UIs, there you have transitions going on. So this is a scale transition plus a translation that is happening here. So you really use, in modern UIs, you really use transitions, not too much, but they are applied in UIs, like, for example, material design. Another example where you need, for example, fade transitions is when you do a drop down in material design. In the material design, when you open that, it fades over, for example. So modern UI toolkits use animations at certain points. So it's not that this list is popping up; it's fading in itself, right? So while on the first view it looks like this is not really needed, so you don't need transitions and translations and animations in your UI toolkit. You use them if they are there in a very special way if you implement really cool modern looking UIs yourself. So they are really, there is a need for them. Okay, so we now learned that we have, in JavaFX, we have this scene graph, we have this layout container like a border pane where we can put stuff on the top, on the right, on the left, on the bottom. We haven't used the V-box and an H-box, but if you start to use them, they are natural. So you have a V-box and it adds its elements on top of each other. Okay, so good. So final thing that we can discuss here is, you see here when I create this scene that I add a CSS file. JavaFX really separates things very strict. So you have Java code to write business logic and complex UIs that have a lot of states and where you need a lot of complexity. Theming, and whether the button is black, white, or yellow, or green, is not part of your Java code. It's part of DSL named CSS, and CSS is nothing more than a DSL, a domain-specific language to express styling in the end. And JavaFX expresses all things that apply to colors, font sizes, all this stuff is done using CSS. So you can add 1 to 100 CSS files to your application to really make it look like the way your designers decided your application should look like. So if you open the CSS file, it's empty. So first we need to know how can we reference, for example, a button element in the scene graph or in our UI. And the trick is all controls have a class selector who is identical to the name. So it's just lowercase button. When we have a label, it's dot label. If you have a combo box, it's dot combo box. So when we have a button and we do control space, then the FXClipse tooling added a CSS editor that knows exactly about the properties you can apply on a button element. So for example, on a button, we can say we want to have a different background color. Background color is red. And if we launch the UI, then we have a button with a red background. You see a button has, for example, it's a rounded rectangle. If you don't want a rounded rectangle, background radius is 0, then our button has no rounded rectangle anymore. It's not round anymore, it's no rounding. Everything you see on screen, every property in JavaFX can, all these theming properties, can be expressed with CSS. So background color. And it's not just solid background color. Say, for example, you want to have a gradient there, a linear gradient going from white to red at that 50%. Then we have a gradient applied to our button. So This means you can really use linear gradient, radial gradients. It's not just that you have one solid background color, but you have all options that you can think of in the end. So this really allows you to write cool looking UIs in JavaFX.
How did you open the dialog?
When you in the editor and you do control space, it should show you a big color or a big paint. And a paint is a linear or a radial gradient. Okay. Good. So we coded our first Java UI. We used the transformations that you can apply on JavaFX controls or elements. We added some small CSS, so you can do even more. So next thing is we need to learn about fXML. If you implement JavaFX UIs, form-based UIs in JavaFX, where you have to design a form, then most of the time people will use not Java code to set up that, but use fXML. Create a new project, JavaFX project, sample fXML project. And on the last page of this wizard, there is a box saying, what language do you want to use? Do you want to use fXML to encode the UI? There is a special DSL that, because XML is a very noisy language, there is a DSL they created with Xtext called fxgraph, but we are sticking with fXML for today because fXML is the default standard from the JavaFX developers. fxgraph, you can try it out yourself if you want. It's really a nice language to express UIs in a decorative way. We're using fXML. We can keep that settings there. So we have a border pane as the control and finish. This has now created you an XML file. So instead of expressing our UI in imperative code like Java, we can use a declarative language like fXML to define our UI. The good thing is that you are not able to write expressions here. So there is no chance to mix business logic with UI definition. You have a clean separation. UI definition in XML. How is the form layouted? Where are the form fields? The business logic in Java and the theming in CSS. So when we want to encode something here, we have a border pane. And if you wait for a second, you see the editor knows about all this. It shows you the Java doc of, in Java code, we would have called set center. In XML, we express that just by creating a center node. And then you put yourself into the center node, and then you smaller than, and then button. Please use the auto-completion here because it will add the necessary import at the top. And it's a fairly trivial mapping. So when we have a text property, naturally, here we have a text. Hello, fXML. A cool add-on when you express your UI in a decorative way is that I know that there is no business logic going on here. So what we do, and if you go to the quick exist and type here JavaFX preview, Quick Assist, JavaFX preview, and open that. This guy in the lower end is showing the UI you're defining up here. So you have an immediate feedback how the resulting UI will look like. If I encode my UI, I directly see a preview of the UI down here. It can even integrate the styling stuff. So if you go on the top below the import statement, hit Control space, and then arrow up 2 times. And then write here application.css. So the preview, everything is now connected together. So whenever you change the CSS, you immediately see the updating the preview to give you an idea how the UI will look like when it's running. This means you don't have to start and stop the application all the time to find out whether it now looks good or is better. You do that in your IDE while you're typing. And this editor itself is fully integrated. So when you hover over elements, you see the Java doc of the border pane. It's the same Java doc that you see from the Java editor. The same is true for the attributes that you have here. And this allows you to rapidly implement UIs, form-based UIs most of the time. I'm using fxml most of the time when I have to implement a form. Now, as I said, fxml is there to encode it's a declarative way to defining your UI. But if I hit the button, I need Java code to run to print something out or to change something. So how can we come back from this declarative world to the Java world? And the answer to that is that at the top here, we are referencing a class, the so-called controller class. So when the fxml file is loaded, it will create an instance of sample controller. And what we can do now here is, when we wrote Java code, we called set on action and then applied a lambda expression there. We can do something very similar in here. We have here on action, and then we have a method. And now you see this is underlined as an error. The reason is that JavaFX expects that the controller class here has a method named hello that it can call. Whenever I hit the button, it will call a method hello on my controller. And because this method is missing, we need to add that with a quick fix. And if we now go to sample controller, we will see it has created a method hello now for us. So this means using this controller syntax, we can attach ourselves to events happening and run Java code at that point. This means we can go here and say sys hello from fxml. What if I want to reference the button that we have created here? So say we have here the button, and in my controller here I somehow want to update the text when this method is called. So how can I get the button element into my controller? This is done by specifying fx id my button. You see this is now underlined in yellow. It's not strictly speaking an error, but if I had control space or a quick fix control 1, then it will show me the autocorrection, and it will add a field where the name of the field is equal to the fx id that I set in my fxml document. So when this fxml document is loaded by JavaFX, it creates an instance of this controller. It initializes the field here with the node that we have defined in our fxml, and it connects the onAction event to this method. Okay. And the last piece of information that you need is, how can I, when I have an fxml file, how can I make JavaFX UI out of it? The trick is there's a helper that's called fxml loader, and the fxml loader I pass the URL to my fxml file, and then the fxml file gets parsed. It creates instances of border pane, button, of all elements that are referenced there. This means fxml loader is nothing more than a big reflection thing that calls class for name, create new instance, and attaches the elements. So fxml loader loads the fxml file, creates an instance of controller, injects the fields, creates connection between events and my handler methods in the controller. This is all done in just this small call here. And the result is my JavaFX UI. Okay. First hour is done. We are making a break for 5 minutes or 10 minutes now. If you have questions, just ask them.
I have one question. Yeah. We are using SWT in our application. We have the drawback, we have really a lot of UI components, such so we programmed an excellent steroid.
Yeah, okay.
And we are running out of Windows handles. So this is a big problem. We debug deep into that. The problem is SWT uses very old MFC DLLs. And my question is, if we do migrate to JavaFX, can we avoid this problem?
JavaFX has no native handles. Everything you see there are rectangles that are drawn on screen. There is no native handle there.
You need some handles, basically?
There is only one handle, and that's the window.
Okay, that was my
done.
Question.
Yeah.
How do you do UI testing?
There are multiple frameworks. The most famous one for unit testing, well, we always need to differentiate between unit testing and integration testing. For unit testing, there's a framework called TestFX. I'm not happy with it. The problem is its license is not compatible to Eclipse. So I at Eclipse cannot add support for it. So what I started to do is to write my own small unit test framework. In the end, a unit test framework is nothing more than moving the mouse and creating events on the system. So there is, in JavaFX, there is a robot class that you can use to do that for you. So TestFX is there, it can be used. It can even run in a headless environment like a CI system. So we are currently in all applications we are using TestFX. And for integration testing, I have to confess I have no idea. I know Ubular, the guys in the other room, have support for JavaFX. But I've never, well, I'm a developer, I've never wrote integration tests. That's something that most of the time our customers are doing. We are using MVVM as a design pattern, which allows us to test most of our stuff in a headless fashion without bringing up UI, because the view model has the complete state of your UI. So, for example, if something is enabled or disabled, or there's an arrow icon showing or something like that, all this information is encoded in the view model, and I can test this view model with an ordinary JUnit test. Right, and the only thing that is done then in our logic is that we are creating bindings between the view model and our UI elements. So our UI tests are very, very small normally.
Okay.
But I know there are a lot of commercial frameworks that support unit testing with JavaFX, but I always forget the names.
How do you bind the properties with the XML stuff and the controller?
The property.
Is it in the controller?
No, with which properties do you mean?
I added a text field, for instance.
Yeah. You have here a text field, right? Ah, okay, yeah. We can do that after the. Yeah.
Ah, okay. No.
It was in the top. You put a text field, right? Ah, come on. Typing on this keyboard is not text field. First of all, you need to give both an ID, yeah? My text field. And then there is an interface you can implement. It's called initializeable. So when the complete UI is built up and those fields are injected and the setup between the event handler and the method is done, then it calls a method initialize. And there you can now do my button text property bind my text field text property.